I'm Miles, and this is KRAWL, my passion project board game. Where to even begin? KRAWL came to me out of a love for board games, like Munchkin and Root, and tabletop RPGs like Dungeons & Dragons and Shadowrun. There was also certainly influence from card games like Magic the Gathering. I've always had that creative part of me that wanted to make, or rather to finish, a board game of my own creation. The first obstacle to overcome was deciding what it was I wanted to make. I had three ideas in mind. One was a game I had already worked on, some in the past, called Caesar, Ides of March. While I really enjoyed the idea, it seemed almost like cheating, since I had already begun the project beforehand. No, I wanted to make something from the ground up. This one was out of the window, at least for now. Another was a game called Cats in Black. I had come up with this idea while brainstorming my project, and come to really like it. The summary goes a little something like a deck-building card game about feline felons. You would go and assemble a team of cats to take on heist, competing with the rest of the players in a race for the ultimate heist. While I'll definitely keep this one in my back pocket, it didn't seem like the right fit for this project. What I really needed was a game that I wouldn't be upset about if it flopped and wasn't any fun at all. Because, let's face it, nobody gets something as complex as game design right on the first try. Even the people who have made some of the most iconic and well-designed board games out there had to have started with some garbage first prototype to launch their careers off of. And seeing as how I hadn't created anything close to being iconic or well-designed in the past, I needed to start with my first prototype. Thus, KRAWL was born. Inspired by the asymmetry of Root and the hack-and-slash loot-'em-up thrill of Munchkin, I wanted KRAWL to capture that feeling of slaying monsters in a dungeon in the name of fame and fortune. KRAWL was as much a game as it was an experiment. I failed, ultimately, in my vision for the game in many areas, but was very happy with others. I can only assume that this is somewhat of a common dilemma for artists and designers and whatnot. It's a field of compromise, especially when you have time restraint. Now, I'm no expert artist, but I like to imagine I'm fairly competent enough to handle myself when it comes to the job at hand, at least for this project. I used KRAWL as a means to tinker with styles and themes and techniques. It was a lot of trial and error, but it was fun, if a little slow going. There's some art that I adore, and there is some that is borderline revolting. Some were just enough to make me go, I couldn't bring myself to do them over though, because it was kind of the point to leave them that way. I was going to look back on this in the future and be proud of how organized, efficient, and sleek I'm able to make everything look now. At least, I sure hope I can. I mean, it's not like I set the bar very high. I'd have to seriously screw up in a major way. I mean, look at this thing. I showed this to my friend and he said it looked like Yoda. And he was right, it does look like Yoda. But the game wasn't about beautiful art or well-oiled mechanics. It was never about making a good game, or wanting to bring players back to the game and run through it again and again. It didn't even have to be interesting, nor did I need people to want to play it with me. No, the point of KRAWL was to get the game finished. To finish the game for myself, as selfish as that is. If I could do that, I would be satisfied. No more half-finished or barely started projects. I drew a line in the sand. And that meant making some sacrifices. Yoda-shaped sacrifices. Alright, now that I've dumped all of my passion and the reasoning behind that passion out onto the table, let's talk about what KRAWL really is. So, you and up to 3 other players descend into the ever-expanding dungeon that KRAWL is set in. Each player controls a character of a different class: barbarian, rogue, mage, or cleric. Each has their own way of dealing with other players and tackling the dungeon obstacles. Throughout the game, you work with and also against other players to complete one of 3 victory conditions, focusing on different aspects of the game: monster slaying, treasure looting, and exploring. There can only be one true winner, but it can be useful when facing powerful foes to temporarily join forces with other crawlers and tackle the problem together. The result of that simple pitch is a grossly overcomplicated, overscoped, spiderweb mess of a game with unbalanced metas and imperfect estimates. In other words, it's the perfect first prototype. You'll remember my goal was not a good game. It was a functional one. In its current state, you could absolutely play the game from start to finish. It might take 3.5 excruciating hours of poor gameplay, but you could do it. That was all I wanted to achieve, and I ultimately did that. Not only this, but the many mistakes that I made throughout this whole process will help me in avoiding those mistakes if and when I decide to do something like this again. I was able to hash out a good foundation of game design from the first test run into the world of board gaming. Not because the game itself is inherently good, but rather because it isn't good at all. I can build upon the scaffolding that this game allowed me to construct and reach even greater heights because of it. KRAWL, as a game, was a failure. But for me as a creator, it could not have been more of a success. I mean, I've already addressed the iffy art, and the rulebook is downright grody, in all honesty. It is one of the biggest shortcomings in the course of this entire project. It's poorly made and structured more towards organizing my own thoughts than helping players learn the game. I had eventually just doubled down on the fact that the rulebook was just going to have to look like that, since I didn't have the time to waste on making it look pretty. It puzzled me how to solve this issue, as I had clearly outlined that an objective of this project was to make a game that, though complex, could still be understood with relative ease. I eventually settled on making a short video series to act as a sort of tutorial for the game. That series isn't out yet, because 1. I literally decided on doing it like 5 hours before filming this video, and I haven't had the time yet. And 2, because it wouldn't make much sense to upload them without addressing the fact that I had actually finished the game. Even though I have already stated the game kind of sucks, I want to see it through all the way to the end with this final touch. Otherwise, what's the point if I'm not going to get the full experience, right? Might as well continue trying to improve it, at the very least to learn what not to do. Really, all that needs to happen now is the printout and assembly of the game for the physical copy. Also, for the digital version, I have to wait until all my pieces are approved by the site I'm using, Tabletopia, before they are allowed to be added to my game there. So, kind of still waiting on that to finish. After that, it'll all be wrapped up. Or at least until I notice something broken, or a typo, or some other flaw, then it won't be finished, until I fix it, because I'm a helpless perfectionist. Regardless, thanks for tuning in. I hope you found this little presentation enjoyable. Bye for now.